Am I recording? I don't know. I hope so.
Yes.
For some reason it didn't. Did everybody have to go yes?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Okay, there. My Zoom is kind of funny today. All right. So we were just talking about pickleball before we started recording, and I'm glad everybody's on the call. This is lecture 3 in the Buildup course. David Warren, David, wave hi to everybody. David is our special guest today, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. He's a mortgage broker who has an impeccable reputation. And he also runs his own MIC, Mortgage and Investment Corporation. So we're going to hear a lot more about that. And I don't have to tell anybody on this call and the people who will be watching it as a recording how important financing is to the things that we do. You know, if you don't have a piece of land, you don't have a project. But if you have a piece of land and no financing, you still don't have a project, right? So that's why David is so important. So I'm going to kick it off as I usually do. And then we're going to hear from David. And then Aaron is our home run hitter today, our cleanup hitter. He's going to finish the hour and a half that we have together. But anyway, we're just talking about pickleball before we started recording, and it's the fastest growing sport in North America. It's a multi-generational sport. But recently, a local club got shut down by 3 neighbors who were angry because pickleball makes some noise. And what I couldn't understand, Aaron, is why they don't do what we do at Red Pine Camp. Red Pine Camp is a family camp that I attend every year with my family. And we have pickleball courts up there, and we have paddle tennis courts and lots of fun stuff to do. I call that playland, and, you know, games that pretty much everybody can play. Well, we close the courts down in the evening. We turn off the lights and we don't let people play it, you know, until midnight or 2 in the morning. So why didn't they just do that?
I don't know.
That makes no sense at all. I mean, you know, the 200 players are now without you know, places to play, and that's a shame. I mean, we need to get people, you know, fitter in Canada. I mean, we have a problem in this nation with lack of physical fitness. And then, Aaron, you were saying you had a solution for noise proofing, but I can tell you that the best noise proofing that there is out there, including how to reduce wind, is simply to plant trees. If you have an intense bush or forest around your pickleball courts, or anything else for that matter, it's incredible how effective it is. And it's the most effective sound attenuation and certainly wind prevention or wind block that I can think of. And I've got proof that works. So there's all kinds of things you could do, but that's one of them too. All right, I guess I'm a pickleball nut, right, Sean? You know that. Sean,
yes,
Sweeney?
sir. Yes, sir.
I like pickleball.
Yeah.
The only sport
I
I can
really was a noise in the daytime too, Bruce. It was just so loud for the neighbor. Right? You're sitting in your backyard, all yours ting, ting, ting.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, you know, listen, I've had people complain. I've helped them buy houses, and they say have to be close to a school. You know, they're families and they want to be close to school. It's one of their priorities. And then a year later, they're selling the house, and you ask them why? Oh, I didn't like the noise in the schoolyard. So I mean, what the heck? You know. People will complain about pretty much everything. All right, I'm going to share my screen with you guys so we can get going here. So I'm going to kick it off, as I said, and then we're going to hear from Mr. Warren, and then we're going to hear from Aaron afterwards. All right, I'll just make this up. So last week we were dealing with a project where I'm the development manager. If you'll remember, I was working on this project here. Oh, sorry, this project here, which is I'm the development manager for a new veterinary clinic in Canada, which is the west end of Ottawa. It's about 5,400 square feet, slab on grade, beautiful new clinic. It's owner occupied. Before I launch into the slides that I wasn't able to cover last week, I just wanted to make sure you all got by email the course schedule. It's been updated. This is lecture 3, which you can see here. And as I mentioned, we've got David Warren as our guest. Lecture 4 is next week. We were supposed to have a break next week, but Aaron twisted my arm. He is going with his group to Mexico. He's got a project that he's looking at developing down there. So he asked me to schedule the week off the following week. So next week we do have a class, but the following week we do not. That's our week off. You can do some reading, you can do some work on your assignment, and or just put your feet up and hopefully enjoy some nice weather. Next week, we have a guest, Brad Karche, who's a very, very good young developer. And of course, David, you know him well as well. Lecture 5 is May 18th. We're going to have Chris Hicks from Canadian Financial, and they do some really cool stuff, including they'll finance something like 90% of your purchase of a tiny home. If you have some tiny homes, you want to put some financing on, for that matter, or RVs or whatever, Canadian Financial will do that. So we're going to hear from them. May 25th is lecture 6. We've got Amelia Campbell. She's a young banker from BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada. She's a fabulous young banker, and she's going to talk about what BDC, which bills itself as the Bank of Entrepreneurs, wants from you if you're going to get some financing from them, and they can be an important source of capital. We got another week off, June 1st, and then June 8th. Our guest is going to be Matt Woodworth. Everybody calls him Woody. And he has started a project that is going to blow your mind. He started something called the Village Workshops and Storage. He bought 6.5 acres of industrial land in a small town in Ontario for like $175,000, and it includes a 4,000 square foot workshop on it. And his ROI on this thing is off the charts. I wanted you to hear from him. And he's agreed to come on June 8th. June 15th, Eric Lavoie. I think I got that right, Aaron. Eric Lavoie is coming.
Yes.
He is a heat pump supplier. And as you guys know, the folks who've already studied this with Aaron, Aaron is a big believer in electrifying your properties. In other words, all the stuff that, 5 years ago that I was taught to do, use more natural gas and use boilers and hot water heating and many other kinds of energy. Aaron is a believer in this, and I think almost the entire nation of Germany are going towards heat pumps in their residential development. So I think this will be very exciting to hear from Eric. And our last lecture is June 22nd. And I wasn't going to have a guest on the last lecture, you guys, but I really wanted to get an appraiser on this too. So Rebecca Simon, another very good young appraiser, is going to come on, and she's going to talk about what she wants to see when doing appraisals of your investment properties or part of your portfolio. So we're going to hear from somebody who does this stuff for a living. And then if you're doing your assignment, which I hope you will do, at least some of you will, you hand them in on the 29th of June, and you'll get a mark from me and Aaron. All right, so back to this development. I didn't quite finish last week, and you'll remember this is the site plan. So this is about a 2-acre site, about, I guess, 0.8 of a hectare. It's got access on a residential street over here, commercial street over here, and a commercial street over here. It had an existing house on it, which unfortunately, as you recall, burned down, and it's been rebuilt. And you can see it here on the site plan. And this is where the commercial property, the vet clinic, is going to go. It has access from the commercial road, and the house has access from the residential street. So it kind of makes sense. And the idea behind this was that the doctor who runs the clinic, and he's in his 60s now, has a son who's also a vet. And the son lives in the house, and so his commute to work is going to be, 100 or 150 feet. And the older doctor did not want his son to have to pay rent for the next, 3 or 4 decades. But think about this too. By owning your property, I'll just go back to the site plan. By owning your own property, it gives them tremendous flexibility over the next, 3 or 4 decades. If Robert has children and one of them becomes a vet, obviously they can pass. Robert could pass this on to his children. But alternatively, what you can do once you own a site like this is, if they decide to sell the vet clinic at some point in the future, they could sell the clinic and rent the building. So they could keep the real estate and the real estate income with it, or they could sell the building and keep the vet practice, or, there's all kinds of options. One other option I wanted to describe to everybody also is that right now this is on well and septic. So this is on rural services, but the province of Ontario has announced that the official plan boundary is expanding. And so eventually urban services will come to this property, in which case the big septic field that you see here in the middle will be discontinued. That raises the possibility at some point that this property could be severed. It could be severed, so you have commercial on, say, an acre and the house on an acre, something like that. Now it gives you more options, right? Every time you draw a line on a piece of paper, every time you get a severance, at least in my experience, value goes up. Plus, on top of that, you now have more financing and sales opportunities. Financing, if you have two pieces of property, right, David, you can have two different mortgages. And, you know, and if you decided to sell the house and keep the clinic, you could do that or vice versa. So I just wanted you to know, we've thought through, you know, a multi-decade strategy here. All right, now I wanted to show you a C-level budget. This is a C-level budget that we did back in 2021. And as you remember from last week, this clinic got into real trouble because we got into a Planning Act conundrum that we're working through now. So it has been significantly delayed. But so this is an old budget. It's not necessarily up to date. It goes back to 2021. The original purchase price of the 2 acres in the house was $549,000. Land transfer tax, some other costs like legal costs, etc. We did some preliminary design work with Tim Moore, who's a former architecture student of mine. So the total cost was about $562,000 to buy this property. And then we did some prep work and some other concepts that we were developing the idea of adding a vet clinic there. And so what we ended up with was a total cost of $700, almost $750,000. Why is it so much more than the 562? It's because after that, the original house burned down, the doctor had to put an extra $150,000 into rebuilding the house. You guys probably have all heard this, but I'll tell you, it's kind of funny, but it's true. Insurance is great until you need it. So they negotiated back and forth on an insurance settlement, but even with good negotiating skills, the doctor still needed to find $150,000 to rebuild that house. Mind you, it's a nicer house. It's new and it's bigger. All right, let's continue with the C-level budget. So we're at about 1.1 back. This is 2021. It'd be more now. About 1.1 million to build this thing. And remember, a C-level budget is approximate. A B-level budget is obviously better. And the A-level budget is usually something where you actually have hard numbers. In other words, you've got all your engineers, your architects, all your soft costs, all your financing costs and financing fees are included. Your contractors actually put out to tender the trades and sub-trades. You've got all your shop drawings. So an A-level budget, you hope, is within a few percentage points. A C-level budget like this could be out quite a bit, all right? But it's at least an indication. So in addition to the base building, this is a number that we got from Tim Streak, who's a very good contractor. You have to budget for development charges. I don't know if all of you know what a development charge is, but whether you're building a house in most cities or towns in North America or commercial property, this is not a building permit charge. It is a development charge. It's supposed to pay for offsite infrastructure for cities and towns. It's huge. It's almost $136,000, and I suspect it's more today. Then the building permit is not too bad, about $8,000. And then you have to pay for your landscape architect, your traffic engineer. You have to do some soil tests. You have to do an environmental impact statement. You have to hire a planner. We have to do a minor variance here. We need a survey of the property done. We have to pay the architects and engineers. They're not free. We have some financing fees and financing costs. There's site works involved, you know, parking and paving. We have to expand the septic system. We had to put in a new well. We budgeted nothing for road improvements, and we're hoping that the city doesn't ask us to improve the local roads, but they could, so that might not be zero, but we put in zero. We need a new culvert. There's significant signage involved. So all of this additional cost, additional to the base building cost, is significant. It's almost 50%, again, what it costs for the base building. So total construction costs about 1.7 million. And you notice I put in a 9% contingency. It probably should have been 19%, but that's what I did. So the total cost of the new building is probably going to be 1.8 million. And I think now it's going to be over 2 million. That works out to $337 per square foot. So if any builder, with all due respect to Aaron and others on the call, says that they can build for $100 or even $200 a square foot, at least in my experience, that's probably not accurate because they're not including a lot of the costs that you see on this page. All right. And I think I've mentioned in this course, or certainly I mentioned elsewhere, that if you're looking at concrete, concrete and steel towers, that are 30 stories high, when you include land and soft costs and financing fees and everything else, it's now $650 a square foot. So this actually looks okay at 337, at least to me it does. And I'm not going to go through all these calculations, but even where it's owner occupied, you guys, even where it's owner occupied, you want to know what the cap rate is. One, you might need that for your appraisal. Two, you might need it for your bank or your lender. I mean, David will comment on that, I'm sure, later. But also, you want to think about whether it's your primary residence or it's an owner occupied house and vet clinic like this is. You want to think about what happens if, for some reason, Robert, the young son, moves out, and if the Dr. Olander and his clinic moves out, could you rent them? And if so, for how much? And what is the cap rate? So in 2021, I used a 6.5% market cap rate to establish a value of this project of about 3.7 million. And that's based on a cost, including the original house and its improvements, of about 2.5 million. So this looks like it's above water, except if I were redoing this today, I'd probably use a 7% market cap rate, maybe even a little bit higher. Sorry, I use 4.5%. So I would certainly use 6.5 or 7%. So this number would be lower and this number would be higher. So it might actually be that there's really no boost in value. All right. So a sea-level budget is helpful. It helps us get a sense of the project and where we're going with it, but it is not, it is not good enough for the kind of work that David would do or an appraiser would do. You want to try and get as close to an A-level budget as you can. Often that's not possible, so you rely on people like Tim Streak or Aaron Markle, people you like and trust, to try and come up with something that's somewhere between what I did as a first pass and an A-level budget, which would be a B-level budget, which would hopefully be closer. All right, any questions before I move on? Let's see, I'll just check the chat box, see if there's anything in there that I have forgotten. Aaron, you're supposed to be keeping an eye on that for me.
I did.
Okay, well, Stephen, you asked what is the sea-level budget? Did I answer that? Just put it in the chat box, whether I did or not. I hope I did. All right, so there was one other thing I wanted to show you. Okay, thank you, Stephen. One other thing I wanted to show you before I hand it over to you, David. All right, David, I'm gonna make you the co-host when it's your turn to speak. I'll do that right now. So you'll be able to share your screen when the time comes, and it won't be very long. So there was one other thing I wanted to show you, and I want to show you the level of work that I do before I turn an appraiser loose on one of my own properties. These days, I just build slide decks, and I share them with the appraiser before he or she goes on site. And occasionally an appraiser says, "Oh, no, I don't need any help from you. I'll just, I'll do a drive-by appraisal, or I'll walk through in 5 minutes and take some pictures." I fire that person before he or she shows up. Denise is, I think, doing this. Yeah. I fire that person. I use Mr. Trump's famous words from when he was on The Apprentice. I think it was The Apprentice. "You're fired." I fire them right away because I know that they don't have X-ray vision. You've heard me say that before. They don't know on some of the buildings. I've done structural repairs. I've done all kinds of things. Unless they have X-ray vision, they don't know. So I have a full list of improvements in there, what has happened, and you'll see other things. So I thought this was interesting. And I think, Denise, you and Stuart have actually seen this one, so it might be a repetition, so you can nap for the next 10 minutes. All right, I'll show you this one. So this is, this is one of my favorite projects. I don't know why. It's not a very big project, but I really like it. And just want to make sure everybody can see me. Yes, I look great. So this is one of my favorite projects. This is a lake that we dug out. We took out 1.1 million tons of sand. Took us 17 years to dig it. I was there with a shovel. No, I'm kidding. We used a diesel electric shovel and many of them. We dug this thing out and sold the sand, made some money doing it, but it's fed by underground springs and it's absolutely beautiful. And you can see there's all kinds of beautiful homes around it. That was our after use plan. But I also, I recycled the barn. How the hell do you do that? Well, one of my friends who's a developer, and he's now passed away, John Galletta, had a beautiful Amish-style barn about 10 miles away, 15 or 16 kilometers away, and he was going to, knock it down. And I said to John, well, it's such a beautiful Amish-style barn. I don't think that's a good idea. How much are you paying the boys to come and, with a hi ho and knock it down? He said, I'm paying them $3,500. So I asked him if I could come with my own crew and take it down piece by piece, number and letter it. And I'd save him $3,500. And he said, Bruce, are you crazy? And I said, well, a lot of people think so. So that's what we did. So I took it down piece by piece with my crew, and we rebuilt it on this property here. And it was used for many years as a playpen for my 5 kids. And right next to it, you can't see it here, there's a little cabin in the woods, which was actually a hunting and fishing cabin that my boys and I used for many years. So here's a little bit better view of it. We call it the Barndominium. I don't know why. I guess it's just a name we like. And here's another pond, and you can't see it, but the cabin in the woods is over here. And I'll just go back to this slide for 1 minute. And so this was a wonderful place for a lot of fun things. It was a workshop, and it was many other things. And then my kids, kids have a nasty habit of growing up. And so it was unused for quite a while. And then we rented it to somebody, and he left it an incredible mess. You'll see a few slides later what the condition was when we got it back from that guy. But anyway, what it is today is we converted it to a series of workshops. So you'll see it here. So this is a slide deck that went to my appraiser. It's for 2 properties. And this is the rent roll. So we have different people in here renting workshops, and then we have a couple of tiny houses on it. So we get, from these 2 properties about $78,000 or $79,000 a year in income, up from zero a couple of years ago. So that's not bad. And then we have some OPEX, operating expenses, insurance, repairs and maintenance, cleaning, property taxes, property management, marketing, gas, hydro, other operating expenses. It totals only about 26% of gross operating income. My rule of thumb for OPEX is about 34%. So my wife and one of my daughters operates this, and they're pretty efficient. So they're at 20%, 6% is going out the window for OPEX rather than 34%. And the cap rate on this, I don't remember what it was. Let's see what the cap rate is. Well, it's $57,000 of net operating income, almost $58,000. I don't know. I guess it's a 6% cap rate or something like that, but it's probably actually a little higher because it didn't cost us $965,000. That's kind of what I estimated that the fair market value would be, $965,000. But actually, our cost is probably about $500,000. So the cap rate is maybe 10 or 11%. So our cap rate is good, and the market cap rate, when we looked at it, was about 6%. So it gave us a fair market value of $965,000. So the project is probably above water. And then here, just a list of improvements that we have made since we got it back from the tenant. And you'll see in a moment that we turned this little tiny cabinet, which is 192 square feet, into a house. You'll see it. It's really remarkable. But I'm not going to go through the entire list. But again, your appraiser doesn't have X-ray vision. She or he does not know all the good things you've done. So make sure you have a whole list. You just do a mind dump and you give it to them. So here's the list of improvements for the barndominium and for the cabin. And then they always want to see what your property taxes are. So these are the property taxes for these buildings. They're not very high, I mean, I'm good at keeping property taxes low. If MPAC ever, Municipal Property Acceptance Corp, whatever they call it, MPAC, which sets these values, ever tries to raise the value, I'll argue out of both sides of my mouth. I'll argue on one side with the appraiser, oh, it's worth a ton, and I'll argue with MPAC that it's not worth anything, right? So that's me. And it just puts some more pictures here. So this is this is the Barndominium. You know, we put a huge gravel parking lot here, so we have lots of room for parking and for vehicles, trucks, and other things. And I also have been putting storage containers on here, because the other thing that I like in addition to workshops is storage. And this is actually Metalcore from Toronto comes to the site and they start to assemble these things. So I'll just go through this. So this is the crew, you know, at Ottawa, it's always winter. You guys remember that. So it's always cold here. As you can see, they're all bundled up. And so they were building a bunch of these containers for me. And the cap rate on these is pretty good. You know, they're expensive. This was about $11,000 for two 10 by 10s, but I rent them for $135 a month. And if you multiply 135 times 12, that gives you about $1,620 on a cost of about $5,500 each. It gives you, you know, like probably about a 20% cap rate, which is good, right? And it also means that the people who have workshops have additional storage because they almost all need it. One of our tenants is boat builders, so we have a pond there. We put in a boat ramp for them. And you can see some of the workshops. And I have to tell you guys, this model is fantastic. You could build a backyard workshop in pretty much any rental property you have, and people will rent an apartment from you or a house from you, and they'll rent the workshop in the backyard. There's tremendous demand for this. If I only have about 4,000 square feet of workshops here, but if I had 40,000, they'd all be rented. So this is one of the workshops here. You can see it here. I've got two overhead doors with passcodes on them. These are some of the containers we have inside. And you can see the workshops are, they're pretty basic, right? That's one of the nice things about industrial tenants. They don't need fancy offices. And here's just some more of the storage containers. You can see that there is an atrium here inside, which is now closed off and has a dog training group. And they're actually an owner training group, and they have dogs. Just, I don't know, that's just another one. You can see that there's a large overhead door here, and we tried to put in as many windows as we could. We have lots of these storage containers. I don't know what this is. I guess more of the stuff. We've got all kinds of workbenches in there and cool stuff. Just another nice picture. Oh, and we got lots of people who want to park their tiny homes here. And so it isn't legal, don't tell anybody, but it isn't legal for them to live in it. So we have some tiny homes that park there at just parking leases, but they might live there too. Now, I wouldn't tell anybody that except you guys. We put in sort of a kitchen. We got a bathroom in here. Yeah, we got a full bathroom in here with a shower. It's just another workshop. I don't know, I got lots of redundancy here. Another shot of the Barndominium. We even have a laundry service in here somewhere. And this is a typical young entrepreneur. This is Abed, who's an amazing carpenter. He's got one of the workshops. He's doing very well. And it's not just young people. I think Dave is even older than me, and he makes guitars out of cigar boxes. Who knew? And they're fantastic. I got that boat builder I mentioned about, and this guy's an amazing individual, a young man from France, and he builds these amazing electric boats. Oh yeah, I do have there's the laundry room. I had to put in a new septic system, which was really expensive. These are the settlement tanks. It's incredible. There's the septic field in the back, and there's the settlement tanks here. $37,000 to do that. I had to get a permit for it. Of course, everything in Ontario is a permit. If you need to go to the bathroom, put up your hand, you need a permit. This is my wife looking at our water treatment system. My God, this thing, it's a reverse osmosis system, and it would be satisfactory again to, for the whole city of Ottawa, $30,000 system. So it's ridiculously expensive. Anyway, there it is. So I wanted to show you this just for fun. This is what it looked like when we got it back from a terrible tenant. And I've been very lucky, knock on wood, over my career. I've had amazing tenants, just amazing. But every once in a while, no matter how careful you are, you get one who just, so you think about the building you saw just a few slides earlier. This is what it was when we got it back from this guy. Look at inside. Look how he left it. Look how he left it. He just, I mean, people would have said to me, you should tear down this building, but I'm a preservationist. and I don't tear things down, not very often. And when I have, it was always a mistake. So there you go. But look at this. How does anybody work in a situation like this? Aaron, when you leave a job site, do you leave it a mess every day at the end of the day?
Not like that, that's for sure. Oh,
No, I don't accept that. But anyway, it took us a while to evict this guy. It just left it an ungodly mess. And I wanted to show you some slides from way back when. These are my three daughters that are now in their 20s and 30s. They're women, mothers too. This is Jessica, this is Miriam and Rachel when they're little, swimming in Dunrobin Lake, the lake that we did. And here's, you can see when we were putting the barn back together, we have a beautiful slab that we poured. It's been there for 20 or 25 years and it's in perfect condition. And the building, knock on wood, is doing very, very well. There you go. Now I promised you a glimpse of cabin in the woods. So this is my old hunting cabin, hunting and fishing cabin. And one of my daughters is actually living in this, what is now a tiny house. And she has she runs a wonderful company called proofcanada.ca. She is a fantastic clothing designer. And so she lives in this little tiny house and she has a workshop 150 feet away. Just another shot of her little porch there. Now this is inside the building. So it has a full bathroom. It has a composting toilet. It's not a Cinderella toilet, Aaron. I think it's a separate toilet. It separates out liquids and solids, but it's been pretty good. I think the Cinderella toilet is better, but it's also more expensive. So it's got a nice little bathroom here. It's got a fridge. It's got, this is her pantry. It's kind of open. This is her kitchen. There's the electrical panel. She's got a cat. So her cat box is in here. This is her coat closet, so to speak. And this is a day bed, I think, that kind of folds out. So that's where she sleeps in the great room. Total is 192 square feet, you guys. And it's a lovely little house, and it's got lots of light. It's got it's got gas. It's got would that be a heat pump? I think it is a heat pump.
that's a heat pump, yeah.
Yeah, and electricity. So it's got everything. it's got a driveway that you could probably park, probably 8 cars on. So we rebuilt that. Just another close up of her gas meter. She's got a little shed for her tools and her garbage. And she hangs out and her friends come, and in behind I dug another pond, and it has a skylight in it too. This is while we were constructing it, and you can see this was just an old hunting cabin that is now turned into a house. Anyway, this is the last slide, David, so you're up next. I thought we'd get an appraisal of about $960 for these two properties, but we got 1.2 million for it. It's about 26.3% above expectations. So doing the kind of work that I did here and providing it to our appraiser in advance, it's nice to get an appraisal once in a while that's above expectations. There's plenty that are below. And so what I would do is I would encourage you guys to do the work and make sure your appraiser digests it. I often will have a meeting with them. These days, it's pretty much over Zoom, and go through it. I say I'm not trying to influence you in terms of your appraisal or the value. I just wanted you to have all the information. But of course, I am trying to influence them in terms of the appraised value. Right? So it was 26.3% higher. Aaron, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, there's an entire market where if you have older houses, you buy a lot, and instead of demolishing it, I've actually negotiated 2 purchases of older houses. People will buy houses and move them. It's an actual very lucrative opportunity that will save you on demolition charges. And the last one I negotiated, we sold a house that was going to be demoed for $50,000. So we saved the demolition fees, and the guy put $50,000 in his jeans. It's a very unique model. I don't always think you have to demo, and that includes all of your auxiliary structures. Like, there's always another use for this stuff.
Yeah, I have actually, I mean, I didn't show it, but on this property, I have my old office was a sales center. We were doing a new subdivision. We had a sales center. And once we had finished with it, Aaron, we moved it onto the site. And then I had another sales office, you know, once the subdivision was sold out, I moved it to create a cottage. So I have the Barndominium, the hunting cabin, and the old office. But I converted sales offices to other uses. Very, very useful. And as long as it's a single story and it will fit on a lowrider and it's not more than about 14 feet, you can take it down the road, right? And it's worth doing. So I like that. It's a great model. All right. So are there any questions for me before we turn it over to David? We actually we actually gave a house away so that we can build on that land. Well, you know, people will buy those, Denise. You know, I like when people ask me how much did it cost to develop Dunrobin Lake, to, you know, to really create that lake, I say, whoa, you're asking the wrong question. How much did I make doing that? We sold the sand for $1.05 a ton, 1.1 million tons. So we got about $1.2 million in our jeans from selling the sand. So entrepreneurs always say, not how much did it cost, but how much can you make? Try and ask yourself that question. So I did that in 34 minutes. Not bad. David, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having me today. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to share my screen here. A couple of things I wanted to touch on that you mentioned, Bruce, which is just very accurate. On the appraisal side of things, I 100% always try to influence the appraisal. I provide performas of exactly what value I'm looking for, based on, you know, if it's a multi-residential, how CMHC is going to view the property. So I'm getting an appraisal back typically pretty well bang on what I'm providing for a value to that appraiser. Same with even on a regular residential or commercial. So definitely there. The cost to build, I think the Altus Group published a paper that last year average cost was $375 a square foot for build costs. So your comment of the $100 and $200 a square is pretty, you know, people I think are a little out to lunch on that side. And the OPEX as well, 34%, I find that's pretty bang on when you're doing your numbers and doing your performas, whether it be a C or a B level budget, kind of looking at and reducing your, you know, factoring expenses between 30 and 35% is certainly something that you want to keep in mind from a high level budgeting perspective to get to your final net and further to that what your true cap might be. So those are a couple notes, Bruce, that I took down as you were talking. Yeah, I just wanted to, before I get into things, kind of touch on those. So I'm here talking about financing. So my name's David Warren. I'm an owner and mortgage agent with Referral Mortgages. I also am an owner and director of DieCap Financial and a host of the Auto Real Estate Podcast. I have personal experience as well from what you can see behind me. And I apologize if I cut out for a second while I'm presenting, because I am watching a gallery down on Preston Street that my wife and I own. So converted a residential duplex to a mixed use on Preston Street. Completely turned over during COVID. Up percent cash or cash return on those. So I do have personal hands-on experience and own investment properties myself. So it's not just from the financing side, but also can speak to things, come from a hands-on experience perspective. So Referral Mortgages. So we are a mortgage brokerage, independent mortgage brokerage located headquartered in Ottawa, Ontario. Have roughly about 67 right now agents throughout Ontario, currently onboarding 6 others. So we'll be over 70 shortly.
Wow.
primarily focused within Ottawa, like I mentioned. We're about 45, I think, in Ottawa, the rest across Ontario. Again, everyone has their different niches that they focus on, whether it be residential, commercial, industrial, construction. Primarily, though, most of our agents are focused on residential, and then there's a couple of us that do also kind of do business in the construction side, just having the experience there. And we have partnerships with over 50 different banks, whether that be major banks like the TDs and Scotias of the world, credit unions like Desjardins, Alterna, Meridian, mortgage-focused banks. So these are what are called monoline lenders. So some of you might have heard of them: First National, MCAP, RFA. These are banks that focus solely on mortgage lending, and then as well private lenders. And speaking of which, I also am one of the owners of DICAP Financial. We are a licensed mortgage administrator with FSR and OSFI. So we primarily focus on private lending within Ottawa, residential first and second mortgages, as well as small construction and small commercial. We are focused on common sense lending. We're not looking at holding debt for an extended period of time. We're looking at clear exit strategies, typically being a bridge to get you through a tumultuous time, or something where you're just needing common sense on that project to get you through to conventional financing. So being that we have, me and my partners have an abundance of experience on the mortgage brokering side, we do look at that exit strategy, and we are able to blow holes through some people's stories very quickly as far as what that exit is, because we want to be fair to our investors and as well fair to the borrower. We don't want you as a borrower holding the debt at 10% indefinitely. That's not something that is sustainable. And the rate of default just increases substantially. And we really want to move you from, wider and private lending all the way, whether it be to B or A financing, and being that. So I was asked to kind of come on here. There's a lot of different topics I could talk about, and I could probably talk for many days on end. And I think Aaron and I had talked about maybe touching on another day as well of kind of going more in depth into financing. But really I wanted to come on here. I know this is focused on investment, multi-residential, things like that. So I wanted to really touch on a new program that CMHC has for multi-residential. This is an MLI Select program. It's one that probably a lot of you have not heard of. So I wanted to touch on the differences between multi-residential lending with CMHC and this new program. So conventionally, the regular CMHC multi-residential financing is for 5 units and up. It is a maximum loan to value of 85%. And they are looking for a debt coverage ratio on a 5-year term of 1.3 DCR, meaning that your revenues are covered expenses. Revenues than your expenses, an 85% LTV maximum, and other components. Now, getting to that 85% is tricky to do within Ottawa. It's typically easier to do in other, peripheral communities, or even some other provinces where they have higher rents and cheaper land acquisition costs or cheaper property acquisition costs. Because how you might see a property as far as what it's netting at is going to be different from CMHC. There office fees, they're assigning a property management fee, whether you're self-managing or not. They're assigning property management, they're assigning admin costs per unit, things like that. So there are added expenses that might not be, even if you're building a new product, that CMHC is going to assign. So it is harder if your acquisition costs are higher in a market like Ottawa, Toronto proper, things like that, to attain that 85% loan to value. However, when you are building, it is easier. If it's new construction, Aaron and I are doing a project right now where we're able to attain that higher loan to value because of keeping those, we are doing the peripheral areas for building. And so the acquisition cost was lower, which plays into your hard costs and not just your soft costs. So something to kind of keep in mind. So that's the current CMHC program. The MLI Select program, how this is different is they're really focusing on three specific areas, being affordability, so helping kind of pushing builders and developers to build more affordable housing, properties that are accessible, meaning that they are for accessibility for wheelchair access and things like that, whether that be for wider doorways, wider access points, bigger bathrooms, all of that sort of thing, and as well for environmental, so energy efficiency. What they are doing with this is, again, as I have on my third point there, this is for projects that are 3 or 5 units and up. 4 units and under, this does not apply to. That's under your regular residential financing. 5 units and up is falling under the CMHC insured programs. And what they're really looking at doing is providing or allocating a point system on these categories. So you could pick and choose which category. And in the next slide, I've got that point system laid out for you. But if you attain some of the different categories and point systems, you can get as high as a 95% loan to value.
Wow.
You can reduce the DCR requirement down to 1.1x from 1.3. So the typical is 1.3, like I mentioned, on a 5-year fixed. You can also then go to a 50-year amortization on the regular CMHC multi-residential. The maximum is 40-year amortization. So this program, you're also able to get up to a 50-year, and your premiums are substantially lower than the regular CMHC program. So there multi-residential project, a property with a structure on it that you're thinking of tearing down and building, things like that. Keep this project in mind, or speak to a professional that knows this product, and build accordingly into your plans to attain these metrics. You're going to increase your valuation on the property is what CMHC looks at, and you're going to and you're as well going to get a higher loan to value, which is going to not only get you your capital out of your hard costs, but also your soft costs, and even typically get you a lift and an equity takeout. On that equity takeout side of things, you certainly, again, want to work with a professional that knows these programs, because CMHC has changed their their requirements of what that equity takeout could be and what it can be allocated for. So certainly speak to somebody, because that has changed in the last 2 years. I'm sorry I'm rifling through this. I know we are short on time, and I didn't want to, I wanted to kind of touch on some stuff. So, I'll get into the point system here. So you can really kind of see, how it's allocated. So like I mentioned, you've got affordability. So what they're looking for is a different metric of how many of your units are deemed as being affordable housing, which is looking at the median household income in that area based on CMHC's figures. The more units you have that are affordable, the higher your point system, your points allocated. If for your accessibility, the more units that are deemed accessible, then the more points that you are getting allocated, and the more efficient that your building is, the more points you're hitting. Now, how do they discern those from an affordability standpoint? This is one in which this program was geared towards affordable housing. Unfortunately, it's something where you can get the points from the other categories that aren't going to saddle your project in the affordable housing bracket, which is going to reduce your net income as an investor. What I mean by that is, on the affordable housing category, they do look for you to maintain it as for those units up to 30% of your units as being 30% or under 30% of the median household income for rents. for 10 years. So you're signing an agreement for 10 years and they're coming back annually to review and check to see that your units are meeting that requirement for affordable housing. So what that means is that upfront, your financing is based on the revenue that you're generating. Your appraisal is going to be based on the revenue that's being generated on that property. So if you are having to meet those, if you're looking to meet those affordable housing metrics, it is going to, quote unquote, devalue your property and your project based on an appraisal standpoint and how CMHC is going to view it and really what your net in your pocket's going to be because you're having to actually settle yourself for that 10 years on those.
David, we have a question for you, if I may.
Absolutely.
It's from Stephen, and it's a good question, and it's relevant to this particular slide, I think. He asked, can you give us more details how you can take equity out of a property? Stephen was under the impression that with the CMHC program, they did not want you taking out equity.
For one ever ask any questions. Once COVID hit in April of 2020, they changed the rules with CMHC that you can only pull equity out for two reasons. One being for purchasing another multi-residential property, or reinvesting back into your project, or within 3 years plan to buy another multi-residential property. So the two categories project, the reinvesting back into your project or that existing property is if it's an existing building that you're refinancing or topping up that mortgage. If it's new construction or if it's an existing property, it's to then purchase or build other multi-residential. They come back and they do look, they are saying, I should say, that they're going to come back within 3 years and poke their head in and say, what have you done with that money? Now, they are leaving. Lenders actually do follow up or not is still to be seen because as of now, they aren't really, but on funding and on the application, they are really asking questions of, what's the plan? What's the intention of this? What are you doing? So it is kind of in that story up front of, what the plan is for those funds. So you still can. I said, do of reduced rents. It's not impacting your rents, and therefore it's not impacting your net income or your valuations or what you're going to get from CMHC. This is energy. And these are based on drawings. If you're a new build, they're looking at, and you're getting an engineering firm to sign off on, based on the rules around the Ontario legislation and federal legislation around accessibility. Are your drawings meeting those requirements for accessibility? It's signed off on. You're hitting those points based on how many units are accessible, and you're hitting that 50, 70, or 100 point threshold. So that one's, pretty straightforward. The energy efficiency one, we're going through it right now on a build with that I'm working with Aaron. They look at your drawings. They look at what your type of roof you're putting on, what your R level on your insulation is, whether you're going geo or whether you're going heat pumps, that sort of thing, or whether you're electric baseboard or gas. So it's an engineering firm. It's about $7,500. You have a call with them up front. You provide them your drawings and your plans. You'll have a call with them. They'll review them at a high level and tell you whether they think you're going to be able to hit any of their metrics, whether that's first tier, second tier, third tier, before they proceed and take your money, if you will. So there's two firms, two engineering firms out of Toronto. Like I said, it's about $7,500 for a smaller build. And it'll go up from there. Obviously, the bigger the build, the more they're signing on and having to research. But for smaller builds, you're looking at about $7,500 to $10,000, and they're coming back with a report that they sign and stamp, and they say you're hitting certain energy efficiency and and what level you're hitting, and they sign and stamp it and provide it to the lender for CMHC, and you're then hitting those different thresholds. Now, new construction, if you're going off of your Ontario and federal, and Aaron, you can speak to this as well, because I know you've been on the calls with them recently. But if you're hitting those standard build thresholds, you're going to be hitting any of these tiers without really going over and above. Certainly, if you're doing all electric baseboard and single pane and a terrible R value on your insulation, you're not going to hit any of them. But if you're hitting those standard building code as it is today, without even getting into solar or geothermal or anything like that, you're still going to hit some of these. So that one is a pretty easy one to hit, but it's something where you would probably want to have a call before you get into your project, or even before you start considering your projects. Have a call with one of those firms, finding out what they're going to be looking for, and so you can go to your architects and your engineers when you're doing up drawings for a build of, okay, we need to make sure we're hitting these metrics. I want to hit 100 points. I want to hit that top tier so that I'm hitting the 50-year amortization, and I can go as high as a 95 LTV. And you're going, and really it's just in that planning up front, and it's likely not going to be that much more costly to you on the build cost, based on how you're going to build those projects anyways. And look again on those accessibility. If you're going slab on grade and you're going only 3, or top tier, and it's really it's not saying that you're committing long term or indefinitely on the building, that you're renting to somebody that that is needing accessibility, but you're building it to that standard. So those are kind of two categories, and not to take away from what the intention of the program building for houses. Not really, that's a whole other topic, but it's not really addressing the affordable housing issue. Going through the project, or before you start putting the project together, to keep in mind. It is also available for existing projects as well. So if you have a building and you have accessible units, you have ramps, or you have elevators, or you have updated windows, or maybe you've changed it to heat pumps or a boiler or things like that, look into them, because you might be able to refinance with CMHC and hit these, which are going to drop your premiums. They're going to get you a higher LTV, and they're going to, you're going to be able to hit that the higher amortizations and things like that.
David, Karina is asking if you can share the names of the firms, the two firms that do energy modeling for you.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I'll have to go back through my emails to get you the exact names. I just don't recall the
David,
firms.
is it okay with you if we if I put your contact information in the chat box so people can reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got it in the last slide as well. That you can email me, and I'll certainly send that around, and I'll send it out to Bruce and Aaron to circulate to.
I'll also put it in the chat box. But while I've got your attention here, There was a question earlier about your private lending, your MIC. Denise asks, you're a mortgage administrator.
Mhm.
Are you registered with Olympia Trust?
So we are registered with Olympia Trust. So so perfect segue, as my next slide was getting into the private lending. So
Okay.
unfortunately my underwriter Matt Gregg was not able to be on. He had a scheduling conflict, but I've got his contact information at the end as well that you can always reach out to him about any questions on the private lending side. We are registered with Olympia Trust. There is Olympia Trust changed their rules recently where they do not allow for syndicated mortgages with Olympia, for them to handle syndicated multiple Olympia Trust investors over 3 investors. So if there's 3 or more, they require a mortgage administrator to come in and administer that mortgage. We are registered with Olympia Trust, so certainly reach out. We can either, if you're an investor and you're looking to place those RSP funds, we can help with that. Or if you are looking to syndicate with other investors on, even a project internally amongst your group, we can also help and facilitate that if it's more than 3. Again, as I mentioned at the outset, I could talk for days on end about various different topics, but at a high level, yes, we are registered, but we can certainly take it offline and we can loop in Matt and we can learn more about what your goals and what you're trying to accomplish with the Olympia Trust is. So DICAP Financial, just being cognizant of the time because we're already 5 after 1. We are, like I said, a mortgage administrator. We are a little bit different from a MIC. We are currently in the process of changing our structure. A MIC, for the definition of it, is a pool of funds that does not allow, the investors aren't specifically lending on one individual project. They're investing into the MIC or Mortgage Investment Corporation, and they don't, as long as it fits the parameters of that MIC, their funds are being deployed without them knowing on one individual project. It's spread amongst. Mortgage administrator, we pair investors with a specific project. So we have an internal underwriter. We evaluate every project that comes in. We have a board that we send it to and evaluate every single project for for exactly what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish, put some common sense to it. We do evaluate internally before even anyone spending the money on appraisers or anything like that. So we underwrite it. We have a pool of funds. To borrow from a private lender, what is the reasoning behind that? And it could be very simple. It could be that you have your house listed, you've bought a house and your house listed has not sold yet, and your down payment is coming from that existing property and you cannot carry both properties, and your bank will not provide you a bridge financing until you have a sale agreement on your current home. So we will register a mortgage, first or second position on your one listed for sale, and provide you financing even for 100% on the property you're purchasing, for example. So we will cross collateralize and do a loan like that, just as an example of what we might do. Again,
let me interrupt you and let me underline that. What David just said is very important. It also has some downside risk, but what it means is that if you do own more than one property, if you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or many more, if you want, you can sometimes finance a project to 100% of loan to value or even more if you're prepared to provide a blanket mortgage on 2 or 3 or more properties. The downside of that is you provided a mortgage on 2 or 3 of your properties, so they're tied up until you get to the next step. And one of the things that David has said here that I would underline for everybody that's very, very important is that when you see numbers like 10.99% for a construction mortgage, you might be freaking out. But at the same time, he has emphasized this is a bridge to a lower rate, and you should view it that way. So it's okay if you're paying a high interest rate for a period of time, if you can afford it, as long as it's, like I said, a bridge to a lower rate.
No, I appreciate. As I said, we're looking at short-term solutions, and really everyone can read these points, but I want to provide a couple of examples on these construction projects that we've financed. There's front to back semis downtown, started under construction. They are 60% complete. An A bank will not finance a project when it's already been started. They will not do construction financing. A TD Bank, an RBC, a Scotia, they will not finance construction if the project's already started and it's underway. They will also only finance in typically 3 draws at 35% complete, 65% complete, 90% complete. What that means is you need a lot of capital to get you to those next thresholds, in addition to having your soft costs and your initial acquisition costs. So somebody starts their project pre-COVID, they get into COVID, prices escalate, or they start it 9 months ago and they can't get a trade and the project sits and they run out of money, or they're self-employed business. They won't. So if you're building and selling it off, you require carry-on. However, you do not need it if it's a self-build or if it's self-build, but others will not. As if it was a self-build, and they're not needing those carry-on. As Bruce said, we'll also look at cross-collateralization, meaning we will tag multiple properties. If you are purchasing the down payment liquid for whatever reason at that time, but you have other properties, we will do it at 100%. We will cross-collateralize and we'll tag another property so that the overall loan to value on the project is satisfactory to us and our investors. But it's a way in which you could finance at higher than an 80% or 75% loan to value, if you will, when acquiring a project. Same being small construction. Harder to finance. If it's something under $1 million for commercial, they're very hard to finance. There's not many institutions that will finance those, things like that. So there are, I could go through a whole host of reasons why somebody might be looking to use us. The most that we find, and you'll find that more and more, and for these rates, for some that you might be used to just getting an A mortgage from a TD Bank or an RBC, is that as lending requirements and boxes at banks become smaller and smaller for people to qualify, and qualifying rates have gone up as well for those, that it's pushed people into the alternative space, into the B lending, the MIC, and the private lending. And it's actually more common for people requiring those, especially on projects and for investors, to use common sense. If you're self-employed, it's definitely tricky, and you're going to be in that more alt space, because if you have a good accountant, you're not claiming much in income on your personal taxes, and you've got it in holding companies and operating companies. And A banks are looking for what you're claiming on your T1 general, and not what you're having in your holding company or your operating company. And whereas the alt space will factor all of that in. So there is a whole segment that moving over to there for you, and so it's certainly something to consider.
Dave, Janice wants to know, can you do such financing as bridge financing in other provinces?
Yes, it depends, not Quebec. We will lend in other provinces. It really depends. We prefer to lend in Ontario. We've done stuff in Alberta and New Brunswick. We prefer to keep it to Ontario. But yeah, we can look at other provinces. So the biggest thing is really, what I say to that is, I've got Matt's email up here and mine as well, but is to, if you have a project that you're doing, that you are having issues with, you've already started, or you are wanting to run something by, whether that's, construction project or a residential, and you're thinking you might need private financing, or you do need it, just reach out and run the scenario by us. Give us a high level synopsis of that deal. We'll get back to you really quickly of either, whether we'll do it or not. And if we won't, who will, or why you could get it done with an A or B lender, and we'll direct you there. Matt was an underwriter on the A and B space for 7 years. He knows that extremely well before moving over to the private space. Myself, like I mentioned, I've been a broker for 10 years. My other two partners in DICAP have been brokers for 10 and 11 years each. And our fourth partner is a developer himself. So we look at all projects, again, with an open mind, but we also, our biggest philosophy is it has to be fair for not only the investor, but the borrower. It has to be fair all around and make sense for everyone. We're not in the business of gouging people. We're not in the business of holding that debt, like I said, long-term. We want a clear exit strategy. And if it's something that we could do, but really you're going to be better suited with a B or an A lender that's going to be cheaper for you, we will tell you to go do that and direct you on how to get that done elsewhere. Because we want to be able to sleep at night, and we have our own morals and ethics that we go by. I know I ran by a bunch of stuff, and I'm sure there's tons in the chat. So maybe I don't know if there's other stuff.
David, I have to tell you, people are putting in very nice comments about you, including one that I put in there. One of the things that has guided me as a coach, as a mentor, as a realtor, as a person, I guess, is if you always put your clients first, you'll always have clients. And what I heard you say, and I know this to be true because I've heard lots of good things about you before today, and that's exactly what you're doing. So really, everybody, what David is doing is he is not only helping you with some financial solutions and flexible financial solutions, but David, you're too young to remember this film, Miracle on 34th Street, but you kind of remind me of the Santa Claus in that film. That Santa Claus, was sacked because I think he was at Macy's, and he was sending people, if they didn't have what people were looking for, he was sending them to Gimbel's across the street. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but that, it's a classic movie from, I think, the 1930s. And then it turns out it was such good PR, and taking care of your clients and putting their interests in front of your own turned out to be a good retail strategy. And I think, you're the Santa Claus of this business, at least for today. Okay.
Well, that's a first comparison I've had to Santa Claus. So I appreciate that.
And I think his name was Kris Kringle, right? Which is Santa Claus, I think, in Dutch. So I really, really admire you. And I think we're lucky to have had you come on and talk to us. About half of the students will watch this on replay. Unfortunately, my internet connection for some reason today was unstable. And so some of the interview may not have been recorded properly, but people will know enough to reach out to you, David, and they'll talk to you directly. We have people on the call from Canada, the United States, and from Mexico, or people in the course who will study it. So, you'll do some coaching too. I mean, not just, providing mortgage advice, but I think because you know this business so well, you can say, well, this might work better, or have you tried this? I mean, there'll be a lot of things that I think if people run their projects by you, I think they'll improve them.
Yeah, I would say to that, and I think the biggest aspect you said at the outset of your presentation was the financing. Financing is oft overlooked. As crazy as that sounds, people look at, and I see hundreds of deals a year.
Yeah.
People look at the prop. I always say the property is the nice shiny thing and the fun shiny thing, and the financing is the boring drub thing on the at the end that people don't want to look at or don't want to think about.
Right.
You need to think about the financing first and foremost. Put together a rough plan before you even find that land or that project. Get to know what your numbers are going to look like or how you're going to approach a deal first and foremost, so that when you come across that land based on that the perimeter, the area, the square feet of that lot, you'll know what you can do and what your capabilities are. Okay, well, even knowing the new build 23, you could say, okay, well, under a 10 unit, I now don't need site plan approval, and now
Right.
my development fees have dropped, and so
Yeah.
that's
Right.
cutting $10,000 off your build, and it's not dragging out with the city for longer. So there's things like that is going to expedite your project, and it's also going to cut your costs. So figuring out ahead of time what maybe program you're going for, whether that's the MLI Select or whether that's just the traditional or whether it's conventional financing, how CMHC or others are going to evaluate your project, and really how you're going to fund it before even finding that project, because you don't want to be left holding that property tumult.
Every time there's a problem, I can get on the phone with David or someone on his team, and there's a real value to that. We're talked a lot about like forming your relationships, forming your team members, and it starts with money. Without money, nothing else happens. And David and the people like him are the beginning of everything you need to have. And really having that great relationship. Like, we go out for dinner, 2-3 times a year. We've traveled together. So we're not only working together as colleagues, but you can end up in a situation where you're friends, and he's still going to offer that great level of service, but that little extra, you know what, I need a favor this time, I need something to happen. That's what this man can do. It's amazing.
So I don't want to let David go without underlining one more thing that he said. He referred to something, for those of you who are not from Ontario, as Bill 23 in Ontario, which has, significantly simplified the planning process and the development process. And David, just as an example of that, one of my clients in London, Ontario, chopped one unit out of his project from 10 units to 9. And he saved $200,000 and 2 years of site plan costs, and got his project underway in remarkably short period of time. And so even though he chopped out 1 unit out of 10, I mean, it made his pro forma went up. I mean, his cap rate and his IRR, his internal rate of return, went way up, because internal rates of return are very sensitive to delay. So Bill 23 is an important good news story. And Michael, where are you? Are you still with us, Michael? I have to share with everybody some good news. Now, Michael is somebody I coach, but I have to tell you, he also coaches me, and I learn almost as much, sometimes more, from the people I coach than they do for me. So really, it's unfair. But Michael, while we were doing this call, I just got word that our mixed-use building in downtown finally passed after 2.5 years of renovation. Finally passed, and we got our occupancy permit.
Excellent. Okay, I'll stop bugging you about that.
Yeah. So Michael, just to tell you what he does for me is he coaches the coach, and he puts my feet in the fire. So David, what we've had this endless renovation of an historic building in downtown, and it's taken us 2.5 years of agony to get the thing renovated and brought up to a 21st century building code standard. It's 150 years of age. And so just while we were on the call, I got the text that we have now passed. So that was really good news. I wanted to share it with everybody because it is a big relief. It means a difference, just so you guys know, like $60,000 a month in versus what you're you're paying to carry the damn thing and what you're earning, right? So it's a significant swing for us as a family. So I wanted to share that with everybody. But David, this was a fantastic presentation. Everybody enjoyed it. Now, Aaron, you've got 9 minutes left. You're the heavy hitter here. It's all over to you.
I think what I'd like to do, my presentation's a little long. So what I'd like to do is kind of touch on a little bit of what David was talking about as it pertains to the CMHA program with the energy efficiency. So the accessibility is a really interesting program, but accessibility in our province is very hard to meet. Larger bathrooms, your radius in your bathroom ends up being very large. And if in a small space, you may not have the opportunity to put a second bathroom. When we designed the sixplex, we moved away from that model. Although it is interesting, it is very difficult and challenging to build from a construction standpoint. But the energy efficiency piece, most of the changes that helped us qualify for the additional incentives, we were going to do anyway. They really weren't an onerous piece for us. I think everyone knows how I feel about heat pumps. One of the main ways that we got to the higher levels is we eliminated all gas. We have no gas in our building at all. We use electric heat pumps. We have electric baseboard as backup because a heat pump operates to about -25 Celsius. And then after that, you have to mix that load. And when you say -25, it's ambient temperature. It has nothing to do with wind chill. So that's maybe 4 days a year in Ottawa. We went to an electric hot water tank system. All the units are inside of the actual apartments. So we have no ductwork running from the basement to the second floor or the third floor. So there's really virtually no ductwork with the exception of a little bit of ductwork on the ERV side. And then we added 2 inches of foam on the outside for insulation. Like those 3 things bumped us up to the next level. And again, we were doing them anyway. This actually happened to be a happy byproduct. I'd love to say I was a genius and figured this all out. We were just doing the right thing. And what I think is really interesting from a rental standpoint, because these will be rentals, is now we have an amazing messaging piece, right? Like we've qualified through CMHC, we've upgraded the building that you will be living in to make sure that we're providing great energy efficiency. The air turnover is going to be great. So your fees, even though you're looking at electric heat, they're going to be less because we've added insulation to the outside of the house. So the messaging piece actually can boost our rent rates because we're doing the right thing. And then, you know, if you move down this avenue, and I hope everyone does, and that's really what I've been going down is all this energy stuff. When you do that, you make it part of your core brand. Your brand and your messaging now is, listen, guys, I'm an eco builder. Does it make sense financially? Absolutely. But no one has to know that, right? No one at the rent of this unit has to know that you've actually, you know, what are we, David? Like 95% over 45 years. Like it's a crazy rate and a crazy time period. Our rate. Standards. That's why you want to live and stay with us in this home. Is top drawings. I sent and they just needed to see all the different equipment that we were installing within the building, which I already had. Sent that off to them. I sent we've all been down this road. It's always a pain. This one is cake. I would really, really, really recommend that you reach out to David and his team. If you have any projects coming up, this is the right thing to do. And there's an amazing return to you when you do it. So that's what I loved about this stuff. I didn't even know the program existed. What, 6 months ago, we started talking about this, David, is that about right? You know, just going down this path, this is the way to be building for sure. And there are, to get to the very highest tiers, you would actually have to sit down with a guy like Dustin and really be very aggressive on your design parameters and your equipment selections, I'm not sure from a construction costing standpoint whether it would make sense to try and achieve those, especially on a multi-unit, because it will add significant cost. There's some barriers on the cost side, but that middle tier, piece of cake, and you'd be kind of, I'd almost say foolish not to give it a shot, really.
Yeah, especially to Aaron's point, hitting those, even the middle tier, is going to drop your insurance premium on that financing side of things, which can add up very quickly. CMHC, you're looking at around 4.5% of the loan amount as your premium. It does go higher based on amortization, but you're cutting it almost in half with this program as well. So it's hard dollars you're saving. And to Aaron's point, you're also getting a much more energy efficient building that's going to save you money down the line as well.
Yeah. So what I'll probably just touch on is, so next week, Brad Cartier will be on the call. Again, I have some partnership agreements with him. What I'd like to do next week, if Bruce gives me a little bit more time, I'd like to actually look at how I set up my partnerships. Because we've talked about this $200, and all due respect to everyone that doesn't think it's possible. I'd like to show you how I get to that. And it actually has to start with partnership. Some of my joint venture agreements. And I think it's pretty powerful stuff because it can form a really unique partnership and a really unique way to move forward in the building community. And not many people are doing it. And I don't really understand why. I understand why, but I think there's a lot of advantages to setting up your corps and your partnerships in a very unique way. And I'll also touch a little bit on how I source up materials and subcontractors, because again, that's like the missing component to this.
So Aaron, and you have about 20 witnesses here. Next week, you're starting, and we have a special guest, Brad Cartier. So the idea of talking partnerships, and of course, Brad is a developer that I mentioned earlier in this call. He's coming on next week, but he's also a partner of yours in many of your ventures. So I think next week, I promise to just say hello, and you will hear less of me. In other words, 2 or 3 minutes introduction, and then Aaron, it's all yours, followed by Brad, and then I'll say goodbye at the end. All right, I promise I'll try and do that.
Yeah, no, I think, and Brad will be a lot of interesting points, development, setup, acquisitions. Like he has a lot of skill sets, so it'll be interesting next week.
Next week, between you and Brad, it's an hour and 20 minutes and 10 minutes of me. I promise everybody I'll do my best. David, I'm a professor, and, like you, I could stand up here and talk for 3 hours. So, I have been known to maybe hog the stage, but I promise you, Scouts Honor, is it Scouts Honor like this? I can't remember. I won't do that next week. I thought this was terrific, Aaron and David. I mean, just fantastic. And Michael did the Vulcan sign. That was cool, Michael. And listen, everybody. Again, I want to emphasize what I said and what David said. You got to have a site before you have a project, and you got to have finance before you have a project. Here we have one of the solutions, and I'm very grateful. I learned something here as well. So if there's nothing else, I think we're on time, 1:29 p.m. Eastern time. And I want to thank everybody, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.